Hi, it's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. How are you? Welcome to the Takeout. Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. This is the micro talk show of the AAPI, the AAXs, depending on which naming convention you prefer, which label. Asian American Pacific Islander. Some people like Asian American Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian. That would be a different set of letters, AAPINHs. And then some people just say, like me, I say Asian American X, and the X is your ethnicity. So Suni Lee, the Hmong Olympic champion, that makes it sound like she's the Olympic champion representing Laos? No, she represents America. She would be an Asian American Hmong, AAH, and and you got to ooh and ah when she's up there on the balance beam or the uneven parallel bars. Anyway, this is the show. We're here at 2 p.m. Pacific Live. We just put it out there. This is a talk show where we talk about our stuff because no one talks about our stuff. And I want to talk about our stuff because there's a lot of it today. You know, if you heard yesterday's show, I did talk about Dianne Feinstein a lot because she represents 6 million Asian Americans. She's the senior senator of California. She's Asian America's senator. And I got some pushback from some people who said, Emil, come on. She's losing it. Well, wait a minute. We don't know that. We know some people have gone to the press and they've begged for anonymity because they're too cowardly to take out their knife and stab Dianne Feinstein in the back and the front. They said, come on, give us anonymity. And you can interview us and we'll tell you our story. And of course, the Chronicle, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Hearst publication, said, oh, yeah, we'll give you anonymity, which is, you know, on the one hand, they have covered because they can say, well, the state of the republic, how can a senator who's losing her mind, allegedly, how can she govern, right? I mean, that's the only reason why it would be acceptable. But the fact is, we have an anecdote. A guy said Dianne Feinstein had excessive small talk in his conversation or in a conversation with the senator. Senator wasn't, well, he was concerned about her mental acuity. But it's hearsay. It's speculative. I mean, and before you smear someone in a mainstream publication, don't you think you ought to at least have something on the record? Not an anonymous observation. Not even if you had it from several people. Apparently, they had 4 members of Congress, including 4 senators, some Republican, or 1 Republican, 3 Democrats, apparently. But they had a member of Congress, and the member of Congress, a House of Representatives member, who knows, a Democrat, may be interested in taking Dianne Feinstein's seat. So it's not as if it was totally, say, conflict-free. You know, I mean, we won't know that unless they were transparent and said, yeah, we said these damning things about Dianne Feinstein. And the paper reported that the people who were speaking out against Feinstein said, oh, well, it's because they were concerned about their friendship. Oh, what friendship are you talking about? The one you just burned down? That's why the only thing, if this is really a matter of the state is at stake, put people on the record. Show people off. Say, hey, here's that guy. Yeah, not only does he want to push Dianne Feinstein off her job and have the seat vacated, but this guy wants to, or gal, it could be a gal, wants to run for Dianne Feinstein's office. Oh, that's why he's saying this. So anyway, I I'm still talking about it today. We talked about it yesterday because I was going to extend it to say, all right, already people are talking about who could replace Dianne Feinstein, as if that's not too premature, but the scuttlebutt is out there. And one of the names is Barbara Lee of Oakland, who is a member of the House. I think she's in her 70s, which is kind of ideal because she's just old enough to have the reverence of other fellow Pauls, just old enough, and just old enough not to threaten Governor Gavin Newsom, who may like the idea of, well, you know, I may not be president of the United States because the United States may not be ready for a president from California who, you know, Gavin Newsom isn't bad looking. He's not a bad looking guy. I mean, he's always been seen as that kind of, you know, glamour puss politician. But that also comes with a lot of baggage about being from California. And when you're from California, you know, Jerry Brown was called Governor Moonbeam. What will they call Gavin Newsom? And I'm just saying, there's a lot of baggage he comes with. Instead of president, he may want to be senator. I mean, there's term limits. Governors get term limited out and then they look for other jobs. By the time, if he appoints Barbara Lee, then Gavin Newsom could run for Senate. He'd be out of his job and looking for something else. See, that's how you got to look at these things. You know, but of course, the main reason why I wanted to talk about it is because it made me face up to the idea that one of the issues that the Feinstein thing brings up is unabashed not racism, ageism. Look, we know about racism, right? And the stereotypes that people have about Asians. Oh, I saw a great 30 for 30 last night. It was on one of the ESPN channels. The one with Bruce Lee, where they talk about how difficult it was. I mean, I remember growing up watching Bruce Lee thinking, oh, Kato, right? And my wife sitting next to me saying, hey, yeah, there's Kato. She loved Kato. And I thought when I saw Bruce Lee as Kato, I thought, he's the big star, right? Unfortunately, he was not. I mean, it's all relative, right? I mean, he looks like he should be the big star. He's coming into your homes. He's on network TV. Had low ratings. He got paid like a fraction of what the big star got, Van Williams, who played the Green Hornet. In fact, it was probably one of Bruce Lee's worst jobs. And the whole thing is there are too many stereotypes he had to bust. And there he was as Kato, which is a stereotype itself. And yet Hollywood had a problem with Asian actors playing, what do you know? They had a problem with Asian actors playing Asians. It was tough. It was tough for Bruce Lee. And all throughout, I mean, he had to leave Hollywood to go to Hong Kong and star in films there. And then he came. And then, of course, while making the films in Hong Kong, he passed away. It's funny how that story comes up all the time about, well, he had a headache, he took some kind of analgesic, he didn't wake up, and everyone has tried to point fingers, but, you know, conspiracies and whatnot, but that was just the sad thing about the passing of Bruce Lee, that he was about to make it really big when those Hong Kong movies would come in in conjunction with the deal with Warner Brothers, come to Hollywood. And then they would recognize, wow, that's Bruce Lee. Anyway, I only bring it up because Asian Americans know racism. Asian Americans know about stereotypes that we battle. But it's one of those things that we understand, and when we see it, we rail out against it. Yeah, racism, bad. Women have made us more sensitive in the last 20 years to sexism. Talk about things that were done in the 60s that aren't done now, 60 years later. It's because the sense of, we recoil when we see sexism, or most of us should, although to this day, there are still examples of both racism and sexism. I mean, I keep hearing, because I follow a lot of female comedians professionally, and they're talking about how some of the clubs, now that they're opening up again, have been booking predator comics. And now, what is wrong with this world? Especially when there still is no parity among female comics in terms of getting booked in places and playing the same places. And yet here are the predator comics getting booked, which is so unnerving because it is sexism, plain and simple. I mean, it's made worse because the predator comics are predators. They are proven practitioners of sexism at the highest level. And they're getting the gigs, getting the opportunities. So we still have a ways to go with racism, with sexism. And with this Feinstein story, if you're just getting around to the Feinstein story that broke last week, this is ageism in action. And this is something that doesn't matter what country you're from, doesn't matter your ethnicity. This is the universal thing, ageism. It's a thing that should bring us together. And I don't know. I see a lot of people see the Feinstein story and say, "Oh well, she's old. She can't remember. She's got to go. No, she doesn't. If she has to go, there's nothing in the Constitution that says a memory lapse is illegal in our government. No, if there's a claim that she's unfit, well, then let there be some kind of proof. Let there be some kind of medical thing that makes her decide for herself to step down. We shouldn't let someone push her away or influence the public because of a stereotypical sense of how old people are. Oh, those are old people. God, next, I don't know if we have it in the budget for do we have congressional diapers in the budget? I mean, I just think, look, is that too low? No, I'm just saying. You got people who have a thing against age. And this is one of the insidious things about ageism. No one wants to cop to it. And before it makes itself evident, people want to push it aside. They don't want to deal with it. They'd rather warehouse the old people. They'd rather push them away. And when you think about it, replace ageism with racism. What is that? Some kind of self-hatred going on? Some kind of overreaction to an ageist's own sense of their mortality, the fact that they're going to get old too. I just think that there's a bigger lesson here in the Dianne Feinstein story, and that is we better start recognizing our ageist tendencies. And it even begins with what we call these older people. First of all, older people is okay. That's a good phrase. Older people. Senior, that's kind of the accepted thing. Elder, when you start saying senior or elder, you have visions in your head that suggest someone frail, someone who needs a cane, someone who can't do X or Y or Z, someone who has a bad memory. I'm just saying, before you look at the Dianne Feinstein story and embrace it and say, yeah, get her out of here, as a lot of young people did on my Twitter account yesterday, I think you got to say, to what degree are we othering older people? To what degree are we practicing a sense of racism, but instead of using race, we're using age? Just forget about, oh, you're from China, you're from Japan, you're from wherever, whatever Asian country, the Philippines. Replace that with, oh, you're 75, you're 85, you're 95. Oh, my goodness. Well, then you don't have a memory. You can barely walk. We ought to put you here next to the kids' table. That way you can, when you fall to the ground, you won't fall too far. This is the kind of discriminatory attitudes that exist toward people of age, toward older people. And we really need to eradicate it, because it's a bad look. It's a bad look for our democracy. It's a bad look for our society. And it's just a bit of othering that people don't quite understand yet. And maybe there are some who say, yeah, I get it, Emil. Look, people get old and we don't. Look, I'm just saying, the stereotypes. Think of the stereotypes that people have about aging people. And the fact is, look, we're all getting older. This will be you someday. And look, not to say that there isn't reverse ageism. I was about to call you a whippersnapper. I don't mean to call you a whippersnapper. That gives you too much vitality and energy. You're just a younger person. And some people are just older. I think that's kind of the timeline. We shouldn't say, oh, they're elders or they're seniors. No. Oh, they're freshmen. There's a kind of like pejorative in that kind of language. I think, it's assumed that as Asian Americans, we just embrace our elders, right? We love our elders, right? I don't know. Some of us do. Some of us don't. I think it's just better if we're looking for a bridge to get to the non-ethnic parts, just the more general, the human parts, the universal parts. Age. We're all going to get there. A little empathy, a little respect, and a little understanding for the Dianne Feinstein story. If you didn't see my column on the Dianne Feinstein story, check it out on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog, aaldef.org/blog. Also check it out on Inquirer.net. I do a version for the Filipinos, the Philippine media based in Manila, and also to the overseas workers who have a vote. And the vote is happening on May 9th. And already I'm just looking at all the different stories that are out there. Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte, the daughter of the current president, she is running for vice president. Bongbong Marcos, the son of the Philippine dictator, the late and, well, in some camps despised, in some camps heralded, the dictator Marcos. It looks like Bongbong Marcos as a, I don't want to say that, well, let's just say he has a lead in polls at this point. But if he wins, I'm just saying, if Bongbong Marcos wins and if the Marcoses are allowed to get back into power, this is just another example of what's happening on the global stage, moving away from democracy and toward autocracy. The Marcoses they're still in the process of paying back the $10 billion that they stole from the Philippine Treasury. So I don't know how that's going to resolve itself if the Marcoses get back. Maybe they'll give themselves a free pass. I would hope not. But we're coming into the Philippine elections already. If you're overseas worker, a voter, there's like 1.7 million across the world, because this is how Filipinos fund their country. They find work elsewhere, they send remittances back, and the total amount of remittances is something, it's like this god-awful number. I mean, it's a tremendous amount. It's like, God, I had that number right here. It's like 300 billion? Is that? No, 30 billion. 30 billion. Oh, I got to check that now. Remittances from the Philippines. Remittances to the Philippines. Money remittances. I mean, without them, I mean, the country would be in sad shape. But see, I remember pulling this the other day, the number, and so that's not an example of my senility, by the way. Although I am older. Anyway, it's a lot of money, like 16 billion from the U.S. alone. That was the number that got me. 16 billion from the U.S. alone. And they need it in the Philippines. And yet there's only like 1.7 million overseas workers in the 1.7 throughout the world. I think there's like 30% are in the U.S. and Canada. Anyway, it's a situation where people all over the world look at these elections, and even more so now, because it looks like Bongbong Marcos is just gliding. The candidate that the good governance people, there are good governance groups here in the United States, based out of New York primarily, they tend to support Vice President Leni Robredo. And Robredo is having all sorts of problems right now, trying to get together her people. And they've got candidates who are pro Marcos and pro Duterte, just ragging on Robredo. The only one not to be critical of Robredo Manny Pacquiao. And I don't know, Manny Pacquiao's got some I got some problems with Manny Pacquiao. I'm rather surprised that Manny Pacquiao, the boxer, yes, the boxer, is having a hard time attracting votes. But it just goes to show you it's not just fame and popularity. There's something else going on. And if you read some of the stories that have been in the Washington Post and the New York Times, a lot of it has to do with misinformation. A lot of it has to do with people not knowing exactly what the Marcos dictatorship did, how it stole money, how it tortured people, how it killed people. A lot of that is just not even in the memory banks of Filipinos age, say, 25 to 50. A lot of them were too young. They didn't understand. They didn't see it when it happened in the 60s. And so it's almost like a clean slate for the Marcoses to come on, except for some of the older folks who say, well, wait a minute. I remember being in the Philippines and covering stories about the People Power Revolution, about the protests against Marcos. I know it was real. And unfortunately, now with the web, new generations, they're moving the Philippines toward repeating a history that is just plain shameful. It's shameful. So we talked about the Philippines. Got to get that off of my chest in relationship to the ageism thing, because that's a big thing. Ageism. It's the one thing that I think, no matter what your ethnicity, no matter what your class, no matter what, your economic class, we're all going to get old. And I just, maybe it's going to be the boomer generation, because as they age and they're this big bubble in the population, as they age, maybe we'll see more activism about older people. I would hope so. But, time's kind of running out. You know what I mean? But that's sort of the good thing, because whatever is said to help change people's ideas about ageism only helps the future generation, only helps those who are now saying, what the heck is he talking about? Oh, just wait 30 years, 40 years. I know you're going to live forever, right? Now, another story that we should talk about today is Robert Aaron Long. You know Robert Aaron Long. He was the Atlanta shooter. He was convicted of 4 of the 8 murders, 4 in Cherokee County last year, but he's still up for the 4 he killed, or he's alleged to have killed, in Fulton County, Atlanta. So he had his hearing today, and he appeared in court. The judge has extended the motion hearing in Atlanta to October. So he's got some time. There's a continuance he has. Robert Aaron Long, according to reports, October 17th will be the new hearing date. And the judge blocked out 3 weeks for the hearings to potentially be held through November 4th, because Long's defense team had another trial. So they're setting it up. So maybe October 17th, the next hearing, all the motions that they want to put forth will be heard. The trial on November 4th. which could be a death penalty trial for the 4 remaining, and the 4 are Asian American women in the spas in Fulton County. Fannie Willis indicated she will not.
Now to other stories we're following tonight. Let's get you up to speed. Facing a judge, a Georgia lawyer charged in the story.
Okay, sorry about that. But this is a situation, remember, where Long already pled guilty, sentenced to life without parole for the 3 murders at the Young's Asian Massage in Ackworth, Cherokee County. And that's where the murders of Xiaoji Tan, Dao Yu Feng, Delana Ashley Yan Gonzalez, and Paul Andre Michaels. That's Cherokee County. The Atlanta murders at 2 Atlanta spas were for Soon Chung Park, Soon Cha Kim, Young A Yu, and Hyun Young Grant. So right now it looks like Long's attorneys have said they're trying to avoid the death penalty. And the Fulton County District Attorney said she's not abandoning the death penalty. So between now, April, and October, we should see some action in terms of what kind of motions, what kind of plea deal Robert Aaron Long wants to make. I mean, Robert Aaron Long, the defense team has filed several motions. The judge gave the state until July 30th to respond, so we're going to see what those motions are. Oh, according to reports, the motions touch on which ones would require evidence and testimony. Some will, such as one concerning a motion to dismiss the death penalty, will require evidence and testimony. So that's sort of the strategy of the defense team. It's kind of weird because he's already been convicted for 4. You would say, good enough? I think no. He's got to face the music. Robert Aaron Long has to face the music for the other 4. But now, does he plea? Does he plea out? I don't know. I am hoping to see what Fulton County does because Fannie Willis is going for the death penalty and she's going for hate crimes. And Georgia's hate crime statute is such that it allows for not just hate crimes on the basis of race, but also on the basis of gender. So it's all on the table. And for those of you, and I presume all of you, if you're Asian American, are following what's going on in the case and what's happening in society, the spa shootings, spa murders still, very much on our minds, and justice still very much on our minds as well. So we'll be following that. I also want to mention the mask lift. We touched on this yesterday, but what's really strange is even though the court said that the CDC and the TSA couldn't come up with these mask edicts, or couldn't say that, couldn't force people to wear masks. I was surprised that the Biden administration didn't say, well, wait a minute. This is a court. We can stay that decision. We can appeal. But it's almost as if the Biden administration wants this to be a DIY kind of thing, which to me is wrong-headed. I mean, look at something like seatbelts, right? Without a seatbelt law, more people would die. Without a seatbelt law, fewer people would wear them, and more people would die. That's why you need a seatbelt law. It's analogous to why we need a mask law, why we need a law to say wear your mask when the situation is such that it could be high possibility of spread. Already we're seeing numbers rise in the nation. Big nation, you might say, well, look at the map. We have more good spots. You know, we don't have as many red spots. Well, yeah, but we also have 500 deaths. Look, I think Biden has kind of relinquished some of his power to, I guess he thinks being the president for public health is not a winning strategy. And maybe this is one way to take that away, I guess, away from the right. Hey, it's not a strategy. Hey, do it yourself. What I think people will find, because this has been the suggestion in a lot of polls, that we're really, as a country, split. It's much more 50-50 than 60-40 or 70-30, anti-mask. There's a loud number of people who, of course, are anti-mask, but people are reasonable and they want to get well. And I think there's just a general fatigue setting in, so that any kind of news that says, oh, no restrictions, no mask, oh, thank goodness, I'm getting rid of mine. Regular listeners of this program know that I am not that way. I'm so pro-mask. I've got so many masks. Wouldn't you know? I don't have any on me now. I'm so pro-mask that I wear mask on top of mask. I wear, so do I have any masks? I don't have mask outside. I'm going to be masked. I hope you are too. I think it's a smart thing to do. I know I'm going to get on an airplane in a couple weeks and I'm going to be masked. I may not be I'm fully vaxxed, but I may not be fully protected even with a mask if there are other people in the tube who are unmasked. But I'm going to take the responsibility. All right? I'm going to show my responsibility. I'm going to mask up. Biden, for whatever reason, wants to make it a DIY public health matter. I wish it weren't that way, because I think it'd be stronger if it were a law. I wish it weren't that way, because I think it'd be stronger if the Justice Department or someone, I guess it would be the Justice Department, went to a higher court and appealed the Florida ruling. Because there are a lot of things going on that indicate spread could come back. We're already seeing some numbers rise in parts of the Northeast. That doesn't make me feel safe about where things are headed. And believe me, I'm doing as many Zooms as I can. I like people too, but I'm staying in. I'm doing things in remote, but I'm planning a public appearance, and that will be a test. But I would have liked it better if there was a CDC guidance that people adhered to, a CDC that people believed in, as opposed to now where no one, the way it is now, the way communications are handed down. There were people at the airport today hearing old recordings saying, wear a mask, when in fact the ruling went into effect and you didn't have to wear a mask. In fact, the airlines reversed any kind of, mask wearing rules. So a lot of confusion. It doesn't help. And we're just bumbling our way through. That's the scary thing. That's the scary thing about all this. I just hope when I see you in person, you'll be masked and I'll be masked. I think that's the best way. The best way. All right. Oh. So we talk about the mask lift. I want to talk about Ukraine a little bit, but because apparently we're training some of the military there now. See reports about people joining the Foreign Legion, the International Legion. We're getting into this serious phase of the war, and it's almost like I don't want. It's not that I don't want to hear about it. It's just that we have gotten ourselves into this thing where, what do we do? Well, I mean, we're training them. We're allowing Ukraine to buy arms directly from the arms dealers, the arms manufacturers. We're giving Ukraine billions of dollars. And it doesn't seem like this is going to end soon. It's just another reason why war is pure folly. How do we respond? Well, we respond in the way we can without getting into war with sanctions, but it's not enough. The more it goes on, and the more the Russians keep it up, I just don't know what our way out is, except endless war, which to me is the bad option. I don't want any war. So let's see. Let's see what happens. I mean, it's hard to be a pacifist or know how to be a pacifist when this is a non-war war, right? I mean, it's going on. We're not in it because it's NATO. We don't have boots on the ground, but it's a war. We call it a non-war war. It just puts everyone in this, well, how do we ethically deal with this? I don't know. I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. This is why we need sports. We need sports because without sports, we don't have an insignificant thing worth arguing about. When you think of it, sports is kind of like analogous to the kind of thing that goes on in battle, and so we can pick sides and two teams go at each other and one team's victorious. It's like a mini war, and then we eat our vegan hot dogs and our beers. We yell, cheer. We go home. And that's the kind of activity that's good. I mean, this other thing is just too serious. So we need sports so that we can say, yeah, that USFL, they're a crappy league. Oh, Oh, the Warriors are back. Oh, the Warriors are back. Did you see that game against? I mean, the Denver Nuggets are all banged up and hurt, but they do have the Jokic, right? He's like the MVP candidate. There was a story where Gary Payton II, who, or maybe he's a third, Gary Payton, son of the Hall of Famer, a shorter guy, a guard, blocked a shot of Jokic. And as they were walking back to the sidelines, Gary Payton Jr., or the third, whatever he is, smacks Jokic on the butt, which is a very athlete thing to do. Hey, buddy. I mean, I only played high school and Pop Warner. And when we got slapped on the butt, it was just like, hey, buddy. Hey. But Jokic took offense and wanted to beat up on Gary Payton. I know, masculinity issues. I just think that shows that the Denver Nuggets have a problem. They also had another fight thing on the bench. I think the Warriors win, advance. They look good. And that Jordan Poole. People have to remember how lousy Jordan Poole was his first couple of years. He was absolutely terrible. And that people had relatively high hopes for Jordan Poole the first year. I used to go to the games. I don't go to the games now because, like I said, it's just COVID. I'll just sit in front of my big screen TV like other Filipinos. Yeah. But anyways, great game. And we do need sports so we can argue about these things. We need, it's safer. And then we can let these other folks argue about how to get out of, well, we're not in, but how to end the war in Ukraine. Everyone in reports, all the officials are talking about how this is going to be protracted, meaning months. I sure hope not. Now, it's a big day media-wise because I saw this in the paper, actually on the website. It wasn't in my paper. I get a paper that's old by the time I get it, but it did arrive at least. But it mentions Joe Kahn, the next editor of the New York Times. He's 57, Pulitzer Prize winning China correspondent, currently the number 2 ranking editor at the Times. He's going to be the guy, and he succeeds Dean Baquet, who hit 65, and that's his time to step down. So he didn't say what he's going to do, but apparently he's going to lead another new exciting venture at the Times, according to Sulzberger, the publisher, in a memo that's in the report. So A.G. Sulzberger, I think I met him once at one of these journalism things. So here's the thing about Kahn. He's got the New York Times pedigree. I'm just, I'm looking at his bio here, or looking at the story. Edited his high school paper, went on to serve as the president of the Crimson at Harvard, graduated in 87 with a degree in history. Oh, I was in the history department. He briefly covered Plano, Texas. Hey, I was in Plano, Texas, for the Dallas Morning News. And then he got a master's at Harvard in East Asian Studies, learned Mandarin, and then began covering Beijing for the Morning News as a freelancer in 89. 89, that means he was there during Tiananmen Square. So he was at the Morning News when I was at NPR. And he was detained by the Chinese authorities at one point, asked to leave the country. In 94, he shared a Pulitzer Prize for international reporting. This is good. I didn't realize he was a morning news guy, because Dallas was one of the great things that happened to me journalistically, because when the papers are good, television stations are good. And the papers were great in Texas. There were 2 leading papers, 3 if you counted the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, which was good, but not as good as the Times Herald, which was a Times Mirror product at the time, and not as good as the paper that was Dallas, the Morning News, owned by Bilo, which was a great company in its day. I'm not sure if they still own the Dallas Morning News. Everything has changed in media from 80s and 90s to today. But knowing this is Khan's background, he went from the Dallas Morning News to the Wall Street Journal. I think he's looking like your typical New York Times guy. A quiet intensity matched with big ambitions. Joseph Kahn, the new executive editor of the New York Times. Congrats to him. Hey, also congrats to Dean Baquet. I mean, Dean Baquet and I had we used to bump into each other at journalism conventions, but we had a little healthy exchange, a disagreement, but, minor. But really, best of luck to him. Best of luck to the Times. Love them or hate them, the Times, along with the Post and the Wall Street Journal, remain our journalistic institutions that we can rely on. Newspapers. And now we're in this weird era where newspapers are becoming more electronic. Everything is digital. Television isn't what it was. When push comes to shove and you have to name 3 still strong examples of journalism in this country, you'd have to say it's neck and neck between the Post and the Times, and the Wall Street Journal would be right up there too. So you ought to read all 3 of them. It's not just one silo. It's like, could possibly be 3 silos. So, I guess that's it. I mean, read my columns on ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog. Also on Inquirer.net. I'm telling you something. My take on Feinstein, I put there as well. Ageism. It's just another form of discrimination and oppression. And if you're not hip to it, it's going to get you. I'm just saying that you can't give it short shrift. It is probably the one thing that's going to get us all in one, universal. If you want to talk about universal oppression, universal discrimination against, due to age, significant. And we haven't begun to deal with it. So, regular listeners of this program know at this point, I just get This is our meditation time. This is where if you feel at all any kind of shame, any kind of, I don't know, like you're not feeling up to it. You don't feel like you're worth it. You feel like an imposter. This is where you come and realize to fight the shame, you need love. Love. So take this hand, put it here. Take this hand, put it here. Give it a squeeze. Give yourself that touch that says you matter. That's what it takes. That's all it takes. And as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal Gata.